Global temperature is on the rise, with this year bringing record heat for the planet. The strong El Nino this year likely played a role. The average global temperature of an El Nino year is slightly higher than the global temperature of a La Nina year. However, the strong El Nino is not completely responsible for warming the planet. Global temperatures have been trending upwards since 1950, regardless of whether or not the Pacific Ocean was in an El Nino, La Nina, or neutral phase. In fact, La Nina years in the 21st century are now warmer than El Nino years just 30 years ago. Similarly, the long-term trend of global ocean water temperatures is on the increase, emphasizing that El Nino is only magnifying the ongoing warming trend. 2015 had the highest global ocean heat content on record. About 90% of that extra heat is stored in the oceans. Science tells us that whenever we apply heat to an object, it begins to expand. That object can be anything. It's you, me, the water. Everything is made up of these little molecules. These little molecules are not moving. So if they don't move, that means the temperature is pretty close to zero. If I start shaking them up a little bit, hey, they start bumping into each other, and that means they're transferring heat. And that means the temperature goes up. If I shake them really more, boy, the temperature goes up even higher. And if I shake it really, really hard, boy, the temperature's up near 100 degrees. So the faster the molecules move, the more the heat is transferred and the more expansion I get. When I heat up the oceans, they begin to expand. The oceans are heated, particularly between 0, which is the equator, and 10 degrees above and 10 degrees below. And they begin to expand. Doubt that that happens? Take a look at this. Here's a little water right here. It's a little alcohol. I'm going to apply a little heat to it with my hand. Watch what happens. The molecules start moving. They get faster and faster, and the water begins to expand. In this case, it's the alcohol. Wow, isn't that neat? It is. Very cool. But guess what? The ocean is doing the same thing. If you heat up the oceans and the oceans get super hot, in fact, they get above normal hot, they begin to expand a little bit. And the shoreline, that's the only thing that's holding it back. The water then comes up a little higher on the shoreline. Granted, it's a small amount of water, but it counts over the years. And when you get a hurricane that comes on shore with a 20-foot storm surge, plus maybe a little bit of a change here, plus the extra high tides, oh, you can see where we could have a problem on our hands. All that heat in the oceans is making it expand and sending sea levels up all along our coasts. Tropical systems need heat energy to get started. They get that heat from the oceans. The North Atlantic has seen a significant warm-up over the past 10 years. However, there are other factors that come into play. Wind shear, Saharan dust, pressure, and ocean currents are just a few.
What we're noticing is that the oceans worldwide are much warmer now than they ever have been. And when we have these climate anomalies like El Nino, then you get even a stronger boost of warm water over some of the oceans. East Pacific, Central Pacific, West Pacific, those oceans were all much warmer than normal, especially in the Eastern, Western Pacific, from roughly, especially like around Hawaii, higher than normal, record-setting high water temperatures. Water temperatures in the Atlantic were not as warm as they were a few years ago, but they're still very, very warm. So collectively, the tropics are much warmer now than they ever have been. And so that simply means that the possibility of there being stronger hurricanes is increasing.
The most famous hurricane of all was the hurricane of 1900. It hit Galveston. But there's a little known fact that right up here, right along the Texas coast, in the late 1800s, we had a hurricane, 2 of them in fact, that were so strong, they totally turned this little town here into a ghost town.
But in 1875, in August of 75, there was a hurricane that actually started it was a Cape Verde storm, came off the coast of Africa, went all the way through the Caribbean, and then zoomed right on into Indianola. But it also caused a lot of problems in Galveston. Actually, the far east end of Galveston, there was a cut there, and from the erosion. And one of the stories I read was that on the east end of Galveston, they said the sand was falling away so quick, like sand in a Like it was dissolving like sugar in water.
Oh, wow.
And then that within an hour, if the wind hadn't changed directions, it would have probably cut all the way across the island, you know. But that
incredible.
same storm, that's how strong that storm was when it was going by, you know, edging by Galveston, but it zoomed right on into Indianola and really almost wiped it off the map.
After those two big hurricanes totally devastated Indianola, the residents there packed up and left. They moved to Fredericksburg, into Cuero, and into New Braunfels, and right here in Victoria. Many of them took their houses apart, board by board, and rebuilt them board by board, just like this one. We've not seen a Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic in almost 10 years. Records back to 1878 show that during La Nina years, major hurricanes are more frequent in the month of October than in any other month. Every year, the hurricane seasonal forecast is announced at the National Tropical Weather Conference. It's the only conference that brings together the nation's top tropical experts and broadcast meteorologists. I'm proud to say that I'm the founder and the director of that conference.
One, it gets me prepared for hurricane season, just the mentality and thinking about the products and the covering the storm. That's one of the most valuable things I get out of these conferences. Not only the new information that's shared every year, but just the energy and the collaboration that we experience as we all prepare for the hurricane season.
Dr. Phil Klotzbeck is the one who makes and announces the seasonal forecast each year. Can you tell us where that seasonal forecast came from?
Yeah, so the seasonal forecast actually started from my late predecessor, Dr. Bill Gray. He started doing these forecasts in the early 1980s. His first official forecast was put out in 1984, and these forecasts have come out from Colorado State University since that time. Basically, before then, there was really no way to know how active the season was likely to be. And what he noted was things like, say, El Nino and Atlantic Basin water temperatures, that those had predictive power and could give you some information so you could predict the hurricane season months in advance.
So what all goes into making this forecast? I know there's a lot of factors involved.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that are involved in this forecast. So we have a model, a statistical model that basically goes back and looks at previous seasons and sees which types of predictors worked well at forecasting previous year's hurricane seasons. Can be water temperatures, pressures, wind patterns, and then we look and see basically you'll find is that one set of conditions tend to occur before active seasons and a different set before inactive seasons. For example, when you have El Nino conditions in the tropical Pacific, you tend to get fewer storms in the Atlantic Basin because it increases upper level winds that tear apart storms. We use Atlantic Basin water temperatures, we look at pressures, we look at changes in wind direction with height, and then we look at a lot of model output as well to try to come up with the best seasonal forecast that we can.
We've got a pretty quick start to this season. You know, we're already 4 deep, and when's the last time that we had 4 this early?
Well, we actually set the record. The previous record was actually June 23rd, set in 2012. Now, of course, one of these storms, your namesake, Alex, was all the way back in January, so not necessarily has a whole lot of meaning about what's going to happen this season, since January is actually closer to the end of the 2015 hurricane season than the start of the 2016 one. Early season storm development doesn't give you a lot of predictability in terms of what's going to happen the rest of the season, because typically your strong storms, your major hurricanes, form from systems moving off the coast of Africa. The 3 storms that we've seen so far have been significantly influenced by kind of mid-latitude systems, and none of these storms were particularly strong. The only hurricane we had was actually Alex back in January. Obviously, the last couple of years, the storm activity in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico has been strongly suppressed. Even in 2014, we had very strong shear in the Caribbean. So I think certainly we have to watch those areas every year. But this year, the odds of formation there would obviously be much higher than they were last year in a strong El Nino.
The Texas coast and the Atlantic, for that matter, is in a hurricane drought. The last Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic was Hurricane Felix back in the year 2007. 55 years ago, right here in Port O'Connor, where I'm standing, Category 5 Hurricane Carla came ashore with 175-mile-an-hour gusts and a storm surge of 22 feet. We've gone a long time without a major hurricane here on the Texas coast. The cycle is about 10 years. all signs are pointing to a higher chance we could see a major hurricane on the Texas coast this year.
In the U.S. and especially Florida, where I live, we've been pretty lucky the last several years from hurricanes. We have to be aware that history tells us that the next hurricane could be this season for your area, and the key message there is to be prepared. Find out if you live in the evacuation zone, get your supplies, know what you're going to do, have a plan for you and your family, because it's a lot easier to do that now before the hurricane season starts than it is on June 1st or when a hurricane is threatening your area. So really heed the advice of local officials, find out what you need to do, and do it today.
You know, we got lucky back in 1961 with Hurricane Carla. We could have easily seen 100-mile-an-hour winds right here in the city. So what has San Antonio experienced when it comes to tropical systems? Robert Luna is talking with Jason Runyon about that.